Hi, good afternoon, good morning, hello, wherever you are in the world. I'm Martin Gillespie, your host of Metabolic Wellbeing Without the BS. Joining me today is an incredible human being from the other side of the pond, if you're in Europe, over in the US. Dr. Steven Sideroff, an international psychologist, executive, and global expert in resilience, well-being, stress, and so much more. Steven, welcome to Metabolic Wellbeing Without the BS.
Well, thank you, Martin. It's a pleasure to be here.
Steven, I like to start the podcast off with asking a really important question, a personal one. What does health mean to you today at this very moment?
I'd say on the most basic of level, health is having your body optimally functioning. It means not being held back by either emotions, by poor physical energy. It means optimal energy. It means handling situations in your life in the most optimal way. It means embracing challenges rather than shrinking from challenges, and really a whole lot more. Optimal health combines a whole range of ways of being in this world. In my model, I have 9 dimensions of ways of being in the world that I believe is really covering all of our bases. And we want to realize that optimal functioning isn't just one thing. It isn't just eating right. It's a whole range of how we engage in the world, how we engage with others, we're social beings, how we interact, emotional intelligence, emotional mastery is one of my pillars of resilience. And so it's a whole range of areas in which we want to work toward growing and developing our abilities.
So much there, Steven. I want to take one of the key components that is very strong in today's society. That aspect of people saying, I'm stressed, I don't have time to look after my health.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What would you say to them?
You know, when I first got into clinical work, I was immediately struck by the importance of how we deal with stress. If you think about a wheel with spokes on the wheel, and that you look at the ends of these spokes, and you have your physical health, you have interacting with other people, you have worries about your bills, you have a whole range of what's going on in our lives, in our worlds. If you bring your focus into where those spokes come together at the hub of that wheel, we could say that stress resides there, that stress impacts every aspect of our lives. The more stress in our lives, the more our ability to cope begins to break down, the more our physical health begins to break down. So very early on in my career, I realized I wanted to help people relate and deal with stress in a much better way, because I knew that if I worked with them in that area, it would change all other areas of their lives. All other areas of their lives would be better. So that's the significance I consider stress. And yes, unfortunately, people feel like they don't have time to deal with stress. But I like to use this analogy of 2 lumberjacks. And you have one lumberjack that wakes up in the morning, and he's all gung-ho, and he's chopping wood throughout the day, nonstop. And at the end of the day, he's, admires this big pile of wood that he accumulated. And the second lumberjack Well, he's just as industrious and he's working hard and all day long. But every hour, this second lumberjack takes a break. And at the end of the day, he looks at his pile of wood and it's twice as big as the first guy's. And that's because during every one of his breaks, he sharpens his axe. And that's what people don't realize, is that that taking time to recover from stresses, to engage in some process that recuperates the body, that brings the two branches of our nervous system into better balance, actually results in us functioning better. It doesn't only help us with our health, which it does, but we actually function better. We think more clearly. We're able to focus better, et cetera, et cetera. And so this is what I try and instill in people, is that if you take a little time to take proper care of your body, you will be rewarded not just in better health, but in better performance and greater success in your life.
You know, that's a really interesting analogy, because one key factor I see is that people don't value the importance of rest, recovery, and sleep.
Mm-hmm. Right.
In your experience, Stephen, why is sleep such a pillar of well-being?
Well, I just alluded to our need to recover. I just alluded to our need to keep the two branches of our nervous system in balance. So, but what happens to us throughout the day, we're activating the stress response, because any challenge in our day, any danger, any threat, any concern activates our stress response, mobilizes our bodies, and then we don't give ourselves the opportunity to restore resources used up during the stress. So we're stretching like a rubber band, we're stretching our resources. And before we give our bodies, like a rubber band, the opportunity to recover, we stretch it again and again. And so we need different ways to recover, to go into the parasympathetic branch of our nervous system. And sleep, particularly going into deep sleep, is the time and the opportunity that we get the greatest recovery. There are some biological processes that take place only during the deepest level of sleep, recovery of neurotransmitters. We've now know that there's a system in the brain called the lymphatic system that engages during deep sleep. And it basically cleans up the brain. It gets rid of toxic materials that are the result of metabolic activity and other things. So sleep is very important in this notion of balance.
One key area which has transformed over the last, say, 20 years is the influx of smart devices, be it laptop computers, television, and mobile devices. In your experience, how much, so they're putting false light onto our face and onto our beings, how much has artificial light got on our well-being from a stress point of view, and just from this, what you mentioned at the beginning, optimal well-being?
Let me give you a broader context here that I think is very important. You know, a lot of people work really hard to do really well, but don't realize that we have some very fundamental structural issues that are actually working against us. And there are three that I want to highlight. The first one is that we're working with a biological system, our stress response, that was not designed for this environment. It was designed for a hunter-gatherer environment. So we mobilize for every one of the stresses in our lives, and looking at a screen, a computer screen, a mobile phone monitor, there's stress involved in that, because it's demanding something of us. So it's creating a stress. Usually we're looking and we have concerns about what we're looking at, whether it's the news or whether it's what's going on in our lives. So every time we mobilize for the stresses in our life, we're mobilizing by preparing for fight or flight. Our hunter-gatherer ancestors, which was appropriate in that environment, but our stress response really hasn't evolved any from that, even though our physical environment has changed drastically from that. So there's a mismatch. We mobilize, but how many of our stresses can be handled by either fighting or running away? Almost none. So then on top of the mobilization, we then have to hold in that energy. And that creates tension in our bodies. It interferes with the flow of energy in our body. The second mismatch that we have is that we have tremendous ability, Martin, to adapt. However, we adapt as children to our childhood environment. And then to some degree, that ability to adapt gets frozen to that environment. We learn those lessons very well, but then we take those lessons, which much of the time are not appropriate, such as I'm not okay, such as the world is dangerous because we have a parent who's critical or judgmental of us. So then we expect that as adults, even though it may no longer be the case, no longer be true, but anticipating danger, and that could be someone judging us, produces the same stress response. So that's another mismatch. And finally, and this may be the most interesting to all your listeners here, is if I asked you to think about all of your successes in life, I guarantee you that almost all of them have been associated with what? Stress. You prepare for an important meeting, you have a test, you get a promotion. All of these things, which are indicators or connected with success, are stressful. So what does our brain do? It brings those two things together in a conditioning paradigm. So we've associated stress with success, and therefore there's a part of us unconsciously trying to find stress because of how it's been associated with success. So those are just the tip of the iceberg of why we have difficulties with stress, but also why we get out of balance with our nervous system. That concept of out of balance, autonomic dysregulation, I believe is the source of most, if not all, illnesses, as well as emotional problems.
I'm going to take a kind of swerve here about the out of balance and take it over the last, say, 30, 40 years. What impact in your experience have you seen clinically and with the work that you have been doing for many years on the nutritional imbalance that people are consuming on a day-to-day basis?
Mm-hmm. Yes, well, we see that all around us in the growing numbers of people who are overweight, the growing numbers of people who are getting diabetes, for example. But these two factors come together. What you're talking about is the poor diets that we have. You know, I was watching a half hour of TV the other day, and the number of commercials for sweet cereals, for all of these processed products, was astounding. And you go to the supermarket and the shelves are filled with them for many, many reasons. But you have that, and at the same time, you have increased levels of stress. And one of the consequences of that combination is that we have a growing amount of chronic illness in our society, a growing amount, and it's on the rise. And in the United States, for the first time in recorded history, our life expectancy has actually gone down. So the impact of both the food that we take in and the stress in our lives are having a tremendously negative effect on our society.
That's astonishing. And just hearing that, one of the things that's coming to mind, and it's an area where there are many people who work around the clock, who might be working in a corporate environment or might be working shift work. Have you any experience on that space where, 20% of the workforce in the US and here in Europe work between the hours of 8 o'clock at night and 8 in the morning? And, I'm looking at train drivers, bus drivers, even those working in the airline industry. The stress level and the sort of jet lag mentality. What advice and what experience have you found people in that space in terms of their stresses? Are they higher, lower, and their health in general? Is it considerably different?
So I'm not familiar with the research on that, but I'm sure that it takes a toll. I've talked with people who work night jobs, and they'll tell me that they've adapted. But there's a certain level of adaptation that's not possible with the biological realities of our nervous system and our genetic makeup, which is not designed to live that kind of a life. So I would guess that people who are on different time schedules, as you just described, do have more stress and do have more more illness and problems as a result.
You mentioned at the start, you've got a framework, and I can see it behind you, and a great segue. I know that you've got this book coming out in several weeks' time, which I'm excited for you. You mentioned that you've got 9 dimensions or 9 pillars of resilience. Now, automatically in the English language, resilience has so many different variables here, but you're incorporating it as a pillar of optimal health. That's an interesting angle.
Yes. So I started out wanting to help people who are experiencing stress, and found that people were very resistant to doing so. And, in my book, I go through all of what I've researched in terms of people's resistance. And one of the goals of my book was to anticipate people's resistance so that I can give them the tools to overcome that resistance. But my model of resilience is really a model of optimal functioning. It covers everything that I believe goes into how we can function at our best. And so the first 3 pillars of my model have to do with relationship. The first one is relationship with self, how you treat yourself. Are you hard on yourself, judgmental, or are you loving and positive? The second is relationship with others and how we deal with those other relationships. The third one is relationship with something greater, and that could be spirituality. It could be meaning and purpose in your life. and giving service, something that connects you to the larger community. The next three have to do with organismic balance and mastery. And so there's physical balance and mastery. How quickly can I recover from a stressful experience? How much imbalance are the two branches of my nervous system? How well am I able to fall asleep and stay asleep? The next is mental balance and mastery. And this is about our mindset. Do we have a growth mindset in which when we look at a weakness inside of us, we say, hey, what do I need to do to improve myself on this? Or do we just see it as a defect that's just who we are and we don't have any power over getting better in that category? Mental balance and mastery has to do with, do I wake up and look for what can go wrong in my day or what can go right in my day? So it's a positive attitude, positive perspective. The sixth is emotional balance and mastery, and this is related to emotional intelligence. Do I pay attention to my feelings and work through them so I'm not carrying emotional baggage? You know, sometimes something happens in your life that's not really big, but we have this big reaction to it. We get upset with something little that's happening. That's a signal. That overreaction is a signal that we're sitting on emotional unfinished business that just got touched into by some little thing happening in our day. The next three have to do with how we engage in the world. So the seventh pillar is presence. How much aware am I of what's going on in my world? How present am I? Do I notice, or am I up in my head, thinking about what just happened or worrying about what might happen in the future that distracts me from being present? So presence has two directions to it. One is what I'm taking in, what I'm aware of, but the other part of presence is, what is my presence? When I walk into a room, what kind of reaction do I get from other people? What's the energy that I'm putting out that either other people are attracted to or not attracted to? So that's presence. Eighth is flexibility. Am I able to adjust in my day to deal with things thrown at me unexpectedly? Am I able to adjust my goals when there are obstacles in my path so that I have a greater likelihood of success? Flexibility is, can I change my perspective? Can I put myself in someone else's shoes and see the world from another perspective, which aids me in problem solving, aids me in relating to other people? And finally, my last and ninth pillar is power, which is the ability to get things done. And in business, people focus in on this ninth pillar. And in my book, I have a pyramid in which the ninth pillar, this power, sits on all the other 8 pillars. And we want to be strong in all of these to support power, the ability to get things done, which is having courage to overcome our fears, persistence, being able to focus, being able to set goals for greater success, being organized. It's a whole range of qualities that go into our ability to get things done, to be successful. So that's my whole model, and every aspect of how we engage with the world is encompassed in this model that in my book, I take people step by step through a process of growing along each of these dimensions.
Unbelievable. One of the things is, as you were talking through there, one of the powers that came to my mind, and it's one that I would like your opinion on, is the amazing power we have every day of the power of gratitude.
Yes, yes.
Why, in your opinion, is it something that we almost shy away from it?
Yeah, yeah. You know, it's interesting when I work with people, whether it's either gratitude or it's the ability to take in compliments, people have difficulty. And people have difficulty because we, to a great extent in our day, we're so guarded. We're so prepared for danger, for what can go wrong. I like to say that in life, we either come from the heart or we come from protecting the heart. And too much of the time, we're in that protective mode. And when we're in that protective mode, we're not able to really take in whether it's physical nourishment or emotional nourishment. Gratitude is so important because gratitude literally changes our physiology. Amazing. Gratitude literally changes our physiology. There's something called heart rate variability. Have you heard of that?
I'm a runner. I know HRV backwards from my days doing marathon running and speed work and the beauties of technology. HRV, what's your CO2? What's your max?
Right.
But more importantly, what's your resting heart rate was one of the things that people were really driving home.
Yeah, yeah. Resting heart rate. I believe very strongly in that. Resting heart rate. Mine hovers a little below 50 beats per minute. My doctors always wanted me to get checked up because they think that there's something wrong with me.
And and for the listener, Stephen, you've got a heart rate of around 50 or under 50 is your resting heart rate. Are you at liberty to say how young you are?
So, well, I'm 77.
You're 77 and you've got a resting heart rate of 50. I mean, that's unbelievable.
I work at it. The beauty of the work that I do is that every time I'm coaching somebody, doing therapy with somebody, telling them about one or another aspect of resilience, I'm hearing it myself. And
now that's almost like the youngism of you are a reflection of the people that you spend time with, and you are a reflection of the people that you're working with.
right, exactly. And I know that if I'm going to teach a client something, that the best way for them to really hear me is to trust the source, that where it's coming from. And so there's nothing that I talk about that I haven't worked through myself. And so that's why I'm a better source for other people, because they trust where it's coming from. Back to gratitude. What I want to tell people is that when you're in a state of gratitude, a positive emotion, you drive your nervous system and your cardiovascular system into more optimal states. And we know this because if we look at heart rate variability, we see what's referred to as a very coherent heart rate variability pattern, in which as you breathe in, your heart rate goes up. As you breathe out, your heart rate goes down. And this sinusoidal pattern is the optimal where you want, in fact, it's one of the primary indications of good health is your heart rate variability. Now, if we look at the heart rate of somebody who's angry, who's frustrated, who's upset, we see a very chaotic pattern. So we see a direct connection between our emotional state and our physiology. And now, remember earlier I talked about presence having two directions, right?
Yep.
Martin, if you and I were in the same room and we were standing close together and I monitored your brain waves, we would be able to detect my heart rate pattern in your brainwaves. Amazing, huh? Your heart is the biggest engine in your body, and it's powerful, and it puts out signals that can be picked up in a person you're talking with. So now let's go back to my last point. Think about it. If I'm in a positive emotional state and my heart rate variability is this nice sinusoidal pattern that facilitates my own health, and now you're picking up that pattern in your brain waves, what do you think that has an effect on in terms of you in your relationship to me, but all on a very unconscious level, versus if I'm in a negative emotional state and now you're picking up this chaotic heart rate pattern in your brain waves, does that make a difference, do you think, in terms of just a basic discomfort in being in close proximity with me?
The one emotion that's coming to mind is calmness.
Mm-hmm.
When you're calm, in my experience, you're actually mastering your emotions. And when you're in that fight or flight, you're chaotic. And you said at the start of this conversation, which was really, really important, was the power of rest and recovery. And the story you told about the lumberjacks, how many people in your experience are not being present to their actual day? That this day that we're recording on it, this particular day, we're too busy going, on the weekend I'm going to be doing this, and which is all great to have ambition, but to be present, to have that, and you described it as what is my presence? Where are you right now? I remember doing some work with someone many years ago, and he asked the question, what's the difference between procrastination and potential? And it's all about energy.
Mm-hmm.
But your presence is your superpower. And if you're coming from the heart, and I have to pick you up on something which I think is extremely commendable. To hear a medical practitioner like yourself for many years practicing what they are preaching is a novelty, actually. How have you managed to survive between your peers within the profession that you're involved in that don't put their oxygen mask on first?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you see that in the medical profession, they're metabolically unhealthy.
Right.
And you see that in many professions, not just the medical profession, but the value of, dare I say, loving yourself first has got to come as your priority.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
What advice would you give on that commonality, Stephen, that people say, but I don't have time to look after myself?
Yeah, I would say you don't have the time not to. I would say that, and I said this earlier, we function at our best when our nervous system is in balance. Certainly, our health is at its best when our nervous system is in balance. I don't want to give the impression that, we avoid stress, because it's important to realize that stress and stressful experiences are part of life. And they're certainly important parts of anything we're doing to be successful, for goal-directed behavior. Stress is a part of the equation. It's a useful and important tool. So the intention here is not to avoid stress. The intention here is to realize we have a certain amount of personal energy that gets used up every time we engage in stress. So you want to have the challenges in life. In fact, that's how we grow. That's how we grow our capacity, is to engage in challenges in our lives. However, we also have to realize that it does use up precious energy, and we have to find the time to restore that. You know, our bodies are always making choices as to where to put the energy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we make a choice between a stressful experience, for example, or sending blood and energy to the kidneys to purify our blood, right? So we're always making these choices. So yes, you engage in the stressful behavior, but you also want to take care of your body. Our bodies have basically two choices: defend and protect, or heal, maintain, and grow. And so stress and goal-directed behavior, which we're all engaged in, is defend and protect and use up that energy to achieve certain ends, certain goals. But you also have to restore the body's basic foundation, metabolic health, inflammation, all of the kinds of things that get used up and get worse under stress. You need that recovery to put the body into a place of balance.
Now, that's a great segue, Stephen. I know that you're very passionate around the power of nature as well.
Mm-hmm.
Can you elaborate a little bit around, we are human beings, but for some reason over the last 50 years, we've been hypnotized. And there's nothing wrong with having a nice car, a nice place to live. That's a basic, wealthy ambition. But what about the power of nature? The power of getting out, whether you live near a beach or on a trail. How important is that for your balance of well-being?
Yeah, I will say it's a very big part of my own life. And it's an important part of my life. I live in an area called Topanga Canyon, which is in the county of Los Angeles, the city of Los Angeles, actually. And even though it's close to the metropolis, it is in a rural area. I have a park, huge park right nearby. I see trees and mountains when I look out my door, and I intentionally found a place to live in which I'm in nature. And it's important for me to get out into nature as often as possible. I don't know about you or other people, but when I'm walking on a mountain trail and I'm taking in this environment, I feel better. And I really feel like, you know, when we are looking at computers, we're looking at monitors. It's important in all of our lives, but we are being tuned in to electronic energy that is not natural. And I believe that we need to spend some time in a natural environment so that our bodies have time to resonate with the natural environment. That's what I feel when I take a walk or I'm riding on my mountain bike. My body is resonating with nature, and I just know intuitively and instinctually that it's good for me and good for my body.
You're coming across that euphemistic phrase, you trust your gut instincts. And I think if that's something that I try and advocate with my clients, is the power of your gut intuition. Yeah, we all, I was going to say we all know, we all learn that the power of sleep, being in nature is good for you, rest, recovery, real food is a real way of really healthy outcomes. But we tend to, society puts that quick fix mentality onto us. What's your views on the quick fix as opposed to the longevity of being healthy.
This is such an important point. A lot of people, I spoke to somebody the other day who was clearly sort of out of shape and stressed, but he was feeling, hey, my medication keeps my blood pressure in balance, and this other medication I'm taking keeps this other thing in balance. And that is the mentality, but unfortunately, it's the mentality of a lot of our physicians as well, which is, okay, so something in your body is out of balance. We could give you a medication that brings your body back into balance. And what is really happening is the medication is masking an underlying dysregulation that's not being addressed. And so the cause of the imbalance that you're taking the medication to correct is still going on. And ultimately, it's going to, the medication will no longer be able to keep the body in balance, and there'll be breakdown. And even when the medication is keeping you in balance, so to speak, it's not really doing that because you're still driving your body out of balance, and then you're trying to use the medication to keep it in balance, and it doesn't work that way. Anytime that the doctor says we need to give you a medication, what you want to happen is for that to be a signal to you that there's something that you're doing that isn't working right. Uncover what that's about. Work to address that. Work to find what is out of balance in your life so that you can ultimately be able to restore balance without the medication.
But the majority, an awful lot of people just want that quick fix. And I've yet to hear a medical practitioner talk about a de-prescription model, because I'm for medication with efficacy, has a place in society. But there's got to be an off switch that medics have to say, go into this for 5 days and then wean off it. You break your arm, and the beauties of modern technology, you might get a pin put in, so you've restored that movement. But you also need physiotherapy to regain that muscle movement again.
Yeah.
But the amount of people who just want that quick fix of, oh, I don't want to learn to cook, for example, because I can buy something in the supermarket from a box. And the relationship between gut health and mental health is, it's a huge, huge space. But going back to your philosophy and your pillars of resilience, if you were to give people some advice or some coaching, if you had the opportunity to write a new framework for the next generation, what would that look like and feel like, Stephen?
Well, I feel like I have.
Yeah, I know. That's a great plug for your book, sir.
And this is the blueprint, because you're right about people wanting a quick fix. However, we all have to realize once we start experiencing symptoms, those symptoms are the results of years and years of imbalance. And when you start to notice this, your nervous system is out of balance and you've lost some of the ability to recover. Well, it's never going to be possible to correct that immediately. It has to be changes in thinking, changes in behavior, changes, the changes that I outline in my model. And that takes time. And unfortunately, there are no shortcuts. And so people, as you say, get discouraged. They want the quick fix, they get discouraged. But again, after working in this field for as many years as I have, and recognizing people's resistance, I tried to design a program laid out in my book, in which I refer to the optimal as being on the path. So this notion of the path is my methodology. You know, if I think that it's going to take years or months to get to where I want to go, that could be daunting and overwhelming. So I've distilled the process down to being on the path. And you could take just a few steps and be on the path every day. And so you ask yourself one question at any time in the day: am I on the path or off the path? And if you're off, my book lays out simple steps to get back onto the path. And no matter what's going on in your life, no matter how what symptoms you have, anybody has the ability to be on the path by following the 9 pillars of resilience. So any day you could say, let me focus on one of those pillars. Okay, I'm going to do better in terms of my relationship with myself. And if you take that day and you focus on that, that puts you on the path, and you can't do anything better than that. So you don't have to worry, but what about this? I'm not doing this. Or what about that? I'm not addressing that. Well, you can't do everything all at once. So if you're doing one thing correct based on my model, that puts you on the path, and that's success. So it makes success on a daily basis reachable. It makes achieving your goals doable on a daily basis, because it distills everything down to, am I on or off the path? And then being on the path is defined by my 9 pillars. So there's always an easy way to take a few steps to put yourself on the path. And that's encouraging. That tells people, oh, I can handle that. I can do that, because there's something I could do each day, and I could be successful today. I don't have to wait weeks and months to be resilient. I can do something today and feel like I'm on the path of being resilient.
I like that analogy of being on the path, because there are many models, and for some people, it's almost like walking on a tightrope as opposed to a path. A path can be 2 meters wide or 3 meters wide, but you're on the pathway, and it could be a big step, a little step. It could have mud, it could have, all the environmental things in front of you, but you're making baby steps for progress. But going back to one of the points that you mentioned, and I love it, it's about being present. I want to ask you one of our final questions. What, in your opinion, is the value of kindness and self-kindness and self-compassion?
It's funny that you ask that question, because just a couple of days ago, I went to the premiere of a friend's film that he produced and starred in, called Kindness Within. A wonderful movie. I recommend it to everybody. And it's about loving yourself. It's about taking the time to cultivate inner peace. It's about realizing that that's where it all begins. That's where it all starts. Taking good care of yourself, loving yourself enough to take time to do some of the things that we've been talking about. So kindness, and particularly kindness toward yourself, is very important.
Stephen, I know that you've got a book out, and by the time this podcast goes out, it will have hit the shelves, so to speak. How do people contact you? Because you are a wealth of knowledge, and of all the people I've interviewed, I could sit and talk and listen to you for another 5 hours. But let the listeners find out how they can get a hold of you.
My website is drstephensideroff.com. That's one way. And when will this be aired, do you think?
This will be aired just after your official book launch, which I think is
Okay.
which works really well. So this will be going to air around the end of June.
Okay. Well, the best thing would be for people to get a copy of my book. It's available everywhere. It's called The 9 Pillars of Resilience: The Proven Path to Master Stress, Slow Aging, and Increase Vitality. And in the show notes, there'll be, I'm offering a free resilience assessment booklet. And in that, people can take their own questionnaire and get their own profile of resilience along my 9 pillars. So people can take the questionnaire and they can discover how resilient they are.
That's a beautiful gift, actually, to give people, and I thank you. And I know the listeners will jump on that opportunity, and we'll make sure that it's on the show notes.
Okay.
Stephen, I've had a gift of being able to contact you and talk with you, and I look forward to another episode of this. But from everybody here in the heart of Glasgow in Scotland, which, just out of interest, you mentioned that you live very close to the forest. I'm about 30 minutes away from the bonny banks of Loch Lomond, so I'm not in a bad place for those who know the song well. Stephen, my friend, it has been an absolute gift having the wonderful gift of your presence today, and I look forward to more engagement with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Me too. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.